Okay, if you've downloaded the files from Canvas, then you should have the Lab5 zip, which includes these two documents: PowerPoint for Lab5, which is my first name and under my first name and last name, and the Cheese Plus Pizzeria Word document, which includes data that we'll use in the presentation. And so if you open this Lab5 file with my name on it, I'd like you to, first off, you're going to recognize it. It's that old crap presentation that was really dry and mundane. And what we're going to do is, for the sake of review, we're going to kind of clean it up and make it look beautiful. What I'd like you to do is click on and select slide 1, and then the text box, change the name of the presenter to your name. So change it and to your name, not literally what I'm typing here, but your first name and your last name. With that being done, let's look at adding some flair to this presentation. And as I mentioned, this for this particular demonstration, you will need to save it and submit it to the Dropbox, and it's very short. And you are not required to integrate what we're demonstrating today into the final exam project, but it would be beneficial if you could. And so I think one of the first things I would want to do is to apply a design. And let's just stick with some of the basic themes that we already have that are built in. Some of you may have different ones. For this particular presentation, I like this theme. It does change. On preview, you can see it changes the size of some of our fonts, but we can go ahead and we can fix that. Let's go ahead. It's called Quotable, and this color scheme is pretty nice, but I want to look at some of the other colors and see. See, I really like the blue warm and the blue, so I'm going to go with the blue warm, and let's look at some of the fonts. This works good, but I think what I want to do is to use another sans serif font. So I'm going to scroll through here and just preview. I don't like Gill sans, so I'm just going to go back up here and use Corbel. That's a pretty nice one, but it comes with a drop shadow. So you're going to get more, I see, in these fonts than what you asked for, right? So let's just use plain old Arial. Now again, we get the drop shadow, and that's okay. We won't get it everywhere. And let's save our work. So we've changed the theme, and it changed some things about our fonts, etc. And so we're going to have to make these a little bit bigger, huh? So I'll click into this text box. It's Arial body, and I'm going to change it to about 40. Let's see what happens is when we make it too big, then we have the text overlap, right? So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to make it 32, but I'm actually going to take the presenter and I'll cut it out. All right, and I want to make this, I'll just make this one a little bit bigger. Let's go ahead and we'll make it 48 point. And then I'm going to insert another text box. So how do I do that? This is kind of a quiz for you, right? Well, if I go to insert text box and then click on the slide, I have another text box, and I can type Control V on the keyboard, and it puts the placeholder for your name. So I'm going to go ahead and change this back to Curtis Pembroke. And I studied engineering, not typing. And one thing that I want to talk about is that if we just leave it like that, this presentation is on the CRAP or CRAP principle, right? And so, one of the things we want is good alignment. And so this alignment looks pretty bad. I do want, for the sake of dominance, I want to make this a little bit bigger. We can make it 96 point, or we can right click over here, and if we wanted to, we could select font and we could change the size. Let's make it about 120 because I want it to be really big. All right, and that shows up pretty good, right? Now, for the sake of alignment, then we've got some a little bit, if we want to be finicky, to get these guys aligned. We also want to align our name here. We could make it a little bit bigger, but I don't want it to dominate the slide. I want to keep it small. So let's just go ahead and make it 24 point. And then what I'm going to do is align it with the approximate with the edge of that S. Well, it worked at first, but it didn't. You can always fine tune with your arrow keys. So I can bring it back. And that's really good alignment, because when we look at this, what we see is that we get what's called a little bit of gridding. All right? And if we needed to, if we drew a line down here approximately, we would see a block, like kind of like we could see that these things are aligned and blocked together. See, that's better. Now we can turn on the guides if we want to. We can go to View and show guides, grid lines, and guides. And so then we get a little guide that we can move around, and we can check and see if we've got the perfect alignment. See, there we got pretty good alignment, right? Pretty good. And this one pretty good as well. So that's acceptable. So I'll turn them off. I don't particularly care for them when I'm editing because they're pretty big. Now, I don't like this layout because what it's done is decrease the size of the font, right? But it's also changed the size of the text. So if I go back to home, that's 18 point. And what did I say the rule was? Well, that rule is, I want it to be a little bit, bigger than that, right? I want 24 point. And this headline could be a little bit bigger too. But, one of the things I want to do is put a graphic here that would concretely illustrate the whole idea of contrast and then repetition, alignment. I may use the drawing tools to do it, but, I want to have a graphic. Now, so let's have select a different layout. Let me show you a trick. Right over here in this little nav pane, I can click and hold, select slide 2, and then shift click to select slide 5. And then when I look at slides here, I can click this drop down arrow and select a layout that I want. I want to content. And watch what that does. It applies a layout to all the slides. Boom. And it did it right away. The other thing I could do is right click and go to layout and select to content. Okay, so what is that going to do for me? Well, it changes the layout really quickly, so I get kind of the configuration I want, so I can add a graphic or whatever. So this font size is not what I want, so I'm going to go ahead and change it to 24 point, right? And I can make this headline to 42, or how about 44? That's pretty good. So contrast, the idea that unique elements should stand apart. So I want to make this this particular slide very concrete. One of the things that has a lot of concrete that we see regularly is a stop sign. So let's browse for an image on the web, and let's add a stop sign image. And there's one, but I like this one, right? Because it's a real graphic. Um, it does have this blue background, but it stands out. Let's see what other images are there. Yeah, that's pretty good. This is good. You know, I really like this one. So why don't we select that one and insert it? And boom, now it's in there. The attribution is there. It's always good to have it if necessary. It's licensed, but they don't know the author. I like to take these things and put them in the speaker notes and reference the slide. But since you're students, you're going to be okay with this. Now, this is kind of a plain Jane graphic, right? I mean, it looks okay. It illustrates the idea of contrast, that unique elements should stand apart from one another. And the stop sign is a good example because the red background really lets this, helps this white text stand out. And it almost looks like it's hovering above the sign. And that's to grab our attention. But how do I beautify this thing so it has a little bit of flair? Well, if we go to the Format tab, we can then change this image, and we can use these different frames. So here's one. This is pretty cool, but I like this particular frame. This is another one that's nice because you get a solid rectangle, but it uses a technique that's called soft edging or feathering. But I like this photo type frame thing, so I'm going to use this. Okay, now you notice that what I'm doing now is I would have to go through each of these slides, change the text, and find an image, right? And I'm going to let you do that, but for practice, let's look at this thing. This is 44 and this is 24, right? So for practice, you can go ahead and you can click and drag, and you can change these and set it to 44, set this to 24. And let's add a graphic for repetition purposes. So repetition is something that elements that repeat. It gives an audience the sign of feeling of cohesiveness in a design. And so it might be hard for us to find a graphic that has repetition, right? But maybe what we can do is we can insert something like smart art that gives us a graphical repetition, right? So for example, some of the smart art is used to graphically depict information. So when we look at these particular elements, something like this process diagram is pretty nice because it has repeating elements, and we could actually use this maybe to build the acronym for CARP in a repeating element. So it graphically depicts what we're illustrating. So let's use this particular basic process diagram, and click OK. And then let's do this. We want to enter the text. So C A R and then P. So when you're inserting smart art, once you select it to insert it, then the ribbon becomes contextual. You have a design tab, and you have a text box where it lists the bullets. Each bullet represents a shape that you'll see in the final graphic. We can add shapes, we can add bullets, we can open and close the text pane, we can demote or promote an element. We can change the layout if we wanted to, but we want to stick with this layout. And we can change the color scheme. And so let's go with like this blue. It's a nice contrast to the blue that we have. We could do things like add 3D, but let's keep it consistent and simple. So we're going to use just this basic layout that we have. We could change the colors. That's one way to actually add a lot of good contrast, right? We can recolor the pictures if we want, and it should bring up this little picture color picker for us, but it didn't for some reason. That's strange. Okay, we'll just use this green. But we can see we have a lot of contrast. When we're done with the smart art, we can close it. And this is pretty small, so we could actually resize it, make it a little bit bigger, right? So in this particular slide, I would say that repetition is demonstrated in using this process diagram to represent each part of the CRAP principle. And sometimes I'll call it CARP, but it's actually crap, right? If it's politically correct, it's CARP. But if you want to get your audience's attention, and depending on their age, then I use the acronym CRAP. So what this does is it shows the repeating elements, right? It uses these repeating shapes and the repeating colors. And so that shows repetition, and the audience might expect that repetition. And so what I want you to do on your own is, before we wrap up, I want you to quickly change all of these on your own, and I'm going to pause it and change slide 4 and 5. So finish slide 4 and 5 and then restart the video. So if you've formatted all of those elements, you can see that can become labor intensive. I did want to show you one little thing really quickly that we'll use and learn to use in the next class. And if you click on the View tab and select the Master Views group and select Slide Master, then you get a look at the inner workings of the template. Now, I wouldn't fool around with this right now, but what it lets you do is it lets you edit the masters. So I could have selected this layout, which is what we use in our presentation, and changed the font for the header in the master, and then here made this font here 24 point, and it would apply across all the slides. That's pretty cool. I did it really fast. If you want to learn it, take the next class. Okay, so if you've done your work, then up to this point you've changed the format of the text, and you can start looking for graphics or smart art that show alignment or something. Or maybe you want to draw your own graphics, in this case for alignment, for example. You might want to just go ahead and delete this, right? And insert your own shapes. Let's review that. So let's just select some rectangles and then draw them. We're going to draw a couple. And let's add some contrast. Really good contrast might be to use something like this orange color, but let's use more colors. And so I wanted to go to Shape Fill, and let's select more colors. And I'll drag the dialog box, go to Standard, and what I like is this color orange, right? And we'll go ahead and click OK. And so I want to illustrate the concept of alignment. So I want to have a couple of these boxes, and I'll have a good example and a bad example. So Control C, and I want to have 6 of these boxes. So Control V, that's 4, that's 3. Okay. And I want to copy all of these guys. Control C and then Control V. And now that I've copied and pasted all of them, notice how I copied them. Let me go back. I'm going kind of fast. If I go and I select all these objects, I can simply click and drag to select them. So here, click and drag outside the objects and select them. Then right click and select, and I don't have to group. So I kind of misled you. Left click and drag, and you'll get all of the objects. Boom. Well, now it's not working. So you can also shift click. And so now I can move all of them, right, together as a group. Um, and so what I'm trying to illustrate here is poor alignment. And so this looks pretty good. And what I'll do is shift click to select them, Control C and Control V, and now use my arrow key to move them. And so they're still kind of the same in terms of their alignment, but what I'm going to do is align these guys so they're all aligned together. So now that's cool. I got pretty good. Notice that when I align them, see that little red dash line? That shows me that how these objects are aligned on one another. So these all look like they're nicely aligned, right? But I want these guys evenly spaced. And there's a way to do that without having to fine tune it with your arrow key. So shift click all three of them, and then here under Format, click the Format tab and go to Align. Okay, first let's align them center so they're perfectly centered. And then what we want to do is distribute them vertically. See that example, it shows spacing, and now they're distributed vertically. And so what we have an example of, I'm going to kick this one in a little bit, is good alignment and bad alignment, right? I really want this one to be bad. And so what might also help this, let's save our work, is if we insert a text box. So we can insert a text box here, click here, and type bad. So this gives us a good example of bad alignment. Remember, 24 point is good, 24 point or better. Make it bold so it stands out. And now that's aligned there. Control C and Control V, because I have the same font. This is not bad, right? But what I want to do is I want to keep the same format, right? So I can type good, and I want to use caps. And if I want to, I can align this center. It's going to change it a little bit, but I really want these two aligned together. So click so they're lined along the baseline of the graphic. So go to Alignment, click down, and Align Bottom. So now these are lined together. So these are pretty good examples, and they reinforce everything, right? Because there is good contrast, good repetition, and here's bad alignment, and then here's good alignment. So basically, all three of those first three principles are illustrated here. We'll go ahead and save our work. So now let's go to proximity. Well, proximities, the concept of proximity is that like elements should be grouped together in a manner that supports organization and related content. So for this one, I would probably use shapes again, but what I would do is go back, and I'm going to save this. I want to click all of this. Keep your life simple, right? Control C, go back to this slide, and then Control V. So proximity would mean like elements are grouped together, right? What I want to do is add one more shape here. Control C, Control V. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to, and then Control C, Control V. I'm going to change these. And so let's make this one. We can right click, and we can format the shape, or we can select the shape and change it, right? So we can click on it and then select the shape, and then let's change this thing to maybe, do we have any stars? Where do we have a star that we can use? Let's go down here and let's change it to a star. And that there, so it inserted a star for us. Okay, let's try that again. Well, I'm not going to use these two boxes here. What I'm going to do is delete it instead of changing it, and let's go ahead and we'll insert another shape. Let's insert two stars, and we can just click and drag and change the fill on it, and Control C and Control V, and we'll put a couple of stars here, and we'll delete this here and delete this here, and let's copy these stars, this particular one, and I'm using shortcuts. And what I'm doing is kind of changing the layout a little bit. So now proximity is grouping things together. So right here we've got bad proximity. Things are all over the place, right? This is pretty good because the like shapes are grouped together. And I can improve things on the alignment by using the align tool. So I want to align these guys middle, and then take them and just kind of place them here, and I'll move this caption over here. So for this particular slide, I'm showing fairly good alignment, right? But proximity. So like elements should be grouped together in a manner that supports organization. So right here, this is a bad example of proximity. This is a good example where we have stars grouped together and these rectangles grouped together. Okay, let's go ahead and save our work. And this presentation is getting a little long. The last thing I wanted to show you is inserting charts. So let's insert a new slide, and we're going to just insert a slide with a title and chart. And this isn't related to CARP, but I just wanted you to see it. Let's call this a bar chart. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this data that we have here to create some bar charts. And we're going to keep it simple, and I'm going to try my best to keep these together so we don't obscure the PowerPoint slide. So to do that, let's click on this little chart icon, and then it asks us to select the chart title, and it gives us a preview of what that'll look like in the current theme. Let's just use the cluster chart. We could use bar, right? We use this is a horizontal bar, as I call it. Let's use this clustered column and then click OK. Now what it's going to do is it's going to open an Excel spreadsheet. And what this does is this groups the data by category. As you can see, these are the categories across this row. So this might be something like, if we're looking at our Word document, this category would be the quarters, right? First quarter, second quarter, third quarter. Or dine-in, pickup, and delivery would probably be could be a category. But in this case, it's the quarters. So let's go ahead and change this, and let's just change this to first quarter. We don't have to write quarter because we know that they're quarters, okay? And then the series data from our chart will be dine-in, pickup, or delivery. So let's name this dine-in. And so this works, and we're gonna do these 4 quarters, but let's go ahead and we'll select this data and see if we can copy and paste it. So if we copy it and then click here, can we paste it in? Let's see what happens. There it goes. PowerPoint threw it in there, right? And for the 4th quarter, let's go ahead and add something. Let's say like 65,000. Let's just say these are like sales or something, right? Look what it did though. It aligned it. It kept the alignment formatting from from the Word document. That's okay. Normally Excel aligns numbers to the right. And then we're going to paste that here. And then we'll do this last column. Let's just do this third quarter right here. And then let's enter like 66, 7 here. We have some fabulous quarters. And then 62, 5. So now we see that we can use an insert a chart by PowerPoint by finding a layout and then inserting the chart. Now we're going to learn more about charts in the next class. But this is kind of a quick introduction to inserting charts in PowerPoint. And so I don't want to spend a whole lot of time because it's spread across both classes. But here's the important thing to remember, that you should have some data up front in either an Excel spreadsheet or in a Word document. If it's an Excel, when you insert the chart and this tiny little spreadsheet opens, you can copy and paste from Excel and you automatically get the chart. And that helps a whole lot. But that's the basic mechanics of inserting a chart. Let's go ahead and save. And again, this is covered again in the next class. Let's talk about animations quickly, because I think that's more important. Let's talk about animations and transitions. Okay, a transition is an effect between slides, like from slide 1 to slide 2. So for example, this animation, push, if we select it, then that animation will, when we get to slide 1, it will push in, right? Same thing here, it pushes in. So you see that, you get a preview of the effect. I typically don't like animations on the first slide. So it goes from I usually add them to, or transitions, should I say, to the first slide. I usually add them to the second slide. So again, to add a transition, select the slide, click on the transition tab, and then select the type of transition that you'd like wipe, for example. That's pretty neat. Nice transition. An animation is a effect that occurs on the slide. So let's say that for this slide we wanted to introduce the concept of contrast, maybe read the caption here or highlight the important points that are listed in the text here. Then we want this to appear. So what we can do then is we can add appear, and then this item, this graphic won't appear until we click the arrow button. So for example, let's preview this. You don't have this feature yet, but I'm going to open this in a slideshow. And it's a tiny window. And if I click the down arrow, see, I see that transition from one slide to the next. See that? And then if I click my mouse button or arrow again, then the stop sign appears. And so that's how to insert an animation. The important thing is that when you're working with animations is that you can preview the animation anytime, right? So if you want, you can preview it. It goes fast, but you get a quick preview. Now, just remember, transitions are animations between slides. Animations are effects on a slide. And you can add animations for how an element appears and how it exits. For example, we could have this particular graphic fly out if we wanted, and that would be the exit. Here's one bit of caution on animations. Transitions and animations take time. On an average, they take anywhere from 1 to 3 seconds, which means in a 6 to 10 slide PowerPoint presentation, you've got an additional 30 seconds just dedicated to transitions and animations, and that takes away from the time that you can speak. And so if you have a presentation like at work where they say, okay, for this week's core group meeting, you have 5 minutes for your presentation. You definitely don't want to use a lot of transitions and animations, so use them sparingly. So we've covered a lot really fast. I'm not going to require that you put all of this, the animations and transitions and even the chart, in your final project. But if you follow along with the lab and you have at least these slides from 1 through 5, I'll be happy. Go ahead and save your work and submit it to the Dropbox.